Hello viewers, welcome to lecture 3 of this course on mathematical finance. You would recall that so far we have looked at the definition of financial derivatives and also had an overview of financial markets, and in particular we have looked at stocks and bonds, followed by discussion on forwards, futures and swaps. So, in today's lecture, we will discuss about one important class of financial derivatives, namely options. So, let us begin with what is the definition of an option. So, an option is a financial derivative or security that gives its owner the right to buy or sell another security, and will refer to this security as the underlying. And this right is bestowed to be exercised on or before a future date, and this date is predetermined, that means decided ahead of time, for a price that is predetermined. So, as the definition suggests, basically it is a contract between two parties where one of the parties agrees to sell some underlying asset to the other party, and the price of the asset that is to be paid at a future time point is decided at the current time period or is predetermined. Also, this future date on which this transaction will actually take place is also predetermined. So, this might give you the impression that this is very similar to forwards and futures that we have already discussed. However, one important distinction between forwards, futures and options is that a forwards or futures is a legally binding contract on both the parties where the transaction actually has to take place, irrespective of the behavior of the underlying asset, which we typically take as stock in the context of our discussion. However, in case of options, this legally binding aspect is not applicable to both the parties, but rather it gives one of the parties the right, but not the obligation, and the other party has to fulfill that particular obligation. So, the situation is slightly different in case of options, in that one of the parties has to take a position of certain weakness, if I may say that, wherein they are obligated, and consequently the other party enjoys a certain amount of leverage. So, what is the distinction between these two? The distinction between that, as I pointed out, is that the owner in case of an option may not buy or sell the underlying asset, which again we will consider in the context of our discussion to be a stock. But it can of course include a whole class of different kinds of assets like bonds, swaps and so on. Now, in case of forwards futures, it is legally binding on both the parties. So, what I mean by this? So, let us actually look a little deeper into what we mean by actually the right to buy or sell. So, the right to buy or sell here means that the owner of the option may not buy or sell the asset if they choose not to do so. So, that is, they have the option, and in this context option means the choice of not buying or selling the asset. So, let us now start to look at some of the classifications of options, so that this particular statement regarding right to buy or sell the underlying asset can be understood with greater clarity. So, the most basic classification of options are the following. In one classification, you have what are known as call and put options. This is one form of classification. That means, every option is going to be either call or a put option. And the second one is, the classification is European and American options. So, let us first begin with the first set of classifications, namely call and put options. So, I will first discuss call options. So, what is a call option? A call option is an option. So, this option where the owner has the right to buy the underlying stock, in our case, is called a call option. So, what does this mean? Suppose there are two parties A and B, and the owner of the call option is A. So, this means that here the party A has the right to buy the underlying asset from party B. So, that means, if the underlying is a stock, then party A under this option, if they want, they can buy the asset or the stock from party B if they want to, but they need not buy the stock from party B if they do not want to do so. On the other hand, for party B, if party A demands that they sell the stock, then party B is obligated to sell the stock to party A at the predetermined price. However, if party A is not interested in purchasing the stock from party B, there is no way that party B can compel party A to buy the stock. So, this means that in this arrangement, party A is in an advantageous position over party B, and party B is at a disadvantageous position as compared to party A. So, next we will look at what is a put option. So, this is the kind of option. So, the option where the owner has the right to sell the underlying is called a put option. So, let us discuss this in the context of the previous example, that again there are party A and B, but this time party A is the owner of the put option. So, this means that party A has the stock. So, if party A wants, they can sell the stock to party B, and if party A does not want, they need not sell the stock to party B. On the other hand, if party B is asked by party A to buy the stock, then party B is obligated to buy it, but if party A does not want to sell the stock to party B, then there is no way party B can compel them to actually sell them the stock. So, again here party A is in an advantageous position over party B. Now, in case of call options, this advantage is in terms of the right that party A, if they want, they can buy the underlying asset or they can call the underlying asset, and that is why it is called a call option. And in case of put option, party A, the leverage that they enjoy is that they can sell the asset or the stock to party B if they want to, or sell, or they can put the asset to party B, and that is why this is known as a put option. So, next we look at the second classification that we had said. So, you would recall that in the we looked at the classifications as European put, the call and put, and European and American. So, let us now define what is the European option and what is an American option. So, we begin with European option. So, what is the European option? If the owner of the option can buy or sell the underlying asset on a fixed or given future date, then the option is called European option. In contrast, American option is a kind of option where you can basically make the transaction or exercise your right at any time on or before a pre-assigned date. In contrast to European option, where the transaction can only happen at one particular predetermined future time point or a future date. So, if the American option, we can write this as that if the owner of the option can buy or sell the underlying up to and including a fixed given future date, then the option is American option. So, let me explain this in a little more detail. So, suppose today's time, today is a time small t and there is a future time capital T. So, in case of European option, you can make the transaction at any time, or rather at the fixed time t that you decide today. So, at time t you decide that this is the European option. So, that means that the future time capital T that you have decided on as the date of transaction is the date on which the actual purchase and sale of the underlying asset can take place. However, in case of American option, this exercise can take place any time from the time small t up to time capital T. So, next let us talk about this future time point capital T that we are talking about, and also the predetermined price that we have decided at time small t, and introduce a couple of terminologies that are in very common usage when you are discussing options. So, accordingly, if the owner of the option decides to buy or sell the underlying, that means the party with the position of leverage, they decide that they want to purchase the asset or the stock in case of call option, or they decide that they are going to sell the stock in case of put option. In that case, we can say that, then we say that the owner exercises the option, or basically the owner has made use of the right or the leverage position that he or she has by virtue of being the owner of the option. So, next, the date on or before which the option can be exercised is called maturity or expiration date. So, in this case, this capital T that we have here, this is what is known as the maturity or expiration. Next, we take note of the fact that there are two key aspects to option: the date on or before which we can exercise, and which I have already said is the expiration date or the maturity. And the second key aspect or the key parameter in case of an option is the price which has been predetermined at which the underlying stock is going to be purchased or sold. So, this brings us to another terminology, or the second key terminology in case of options, namely this predetermined price. So, we decide that the predetermined price at which the option is exercised, that means the purchase or sale is taking place, is called the strike price or the exercise price. So, that means that sitting at time small t, we decide that we will buy the asset for some price k, and this is what is known as strike or exercise. Alright, so these are the two key parameters we must remember whenever we are talking about options, namely k, agreed price, and time t on or before which the exercise can actually take place. It has to be exactly on that day in case of European option, but it can happen any time between small t and capital T, including capital T in case of American options. So, next I just want to make an observation regarding American option, and that is, if the American option is exercised before maturity, it is called early exercise. All right. So, this means that if the purchase or sale is taking place at any time in this part, but not t, then this is what is known as the early exercise. Early exercise means that you are basically doing the transaction not at the final time, but sometime prior to that. Next, let us now, so we have decided to look at these classifications, namely the European call and put, depending on whether it is the right to buy or right to sell. And another classification that we can look at, or we have looked at, is European option and American option, which is dependent on the time and which the exercise can actually take place. So, this basically opens up 4 different combinations of options, namely European call, European put, American call, and American put. So, as a result of this, what do we get? We get European call, secondly we get European put, thirdly we get American call, and fourthly we get American put. So, in case of European call, the owner of the option has the right to buy the stock only at time capital T for a fixed price of capital K. In case of a European put option, the owner of the option has the right to sell the stock only at time capital T for the price capital K. In case of an American call option, the owner has the right to sell the stock for price capital K at any time between small t and capital T included. And in case of American put option, the owner of the option can sell the asset for the price capital K at any time between small t and capital T included. So, let us now discuss this a little more in detail. So, let me first start off with calls and puts European type. Okay. So, we will basically now look at European call and put options. So, first of all, we start off with European call. So, for European call, so we consider a European call option with maturity capital T as before, which gives the owner the right to buy a security S at this maturity capital T for strike or exercise price K. So, recall that we had chosen this timeline that at small t, this is capital T. So, at time small t, we basically write the option, or we basically get into the option, and capital T is the exercise time or expiration, and K is the exercise price. So, then let me introduce the notation. Let S of t be the value or spot price at the moment small t, which is the current moment, and that is why it is called the spot price, because this is the price at which I can buy the stock immediately on the spot, which is why this is referred to as the spot price. So, we will denote S of t as basically the value or the spot price at this moment t, and in general S of t will be used to denote the price of the stock at any generic time small t in general. So, then what are the parties involved? So, let us look at the position of the parties involved here. Right. So, we have the owner of the option, all right, and the other party is who was known as the seller of the option. So, in the parlance of option pricing, the owner of the option is the person who has the leverage, and this leverage could either be the right to buy or the right to sell. And correspondingly, the seller of the option is the party which is under obligation, and the obligation is the obligation to sell or the obligation to buy respectively. So, owner of the option is sometimes they are known as the buyer or holder, or as usual they might be called simply the owner, and the seller of the option typically are referred to as seller and or the writer. So, please understand that in case of a European call option, there are two different ownerships. One is the owner of the option and the other is the owner of the underlying asset. So, this means that if the party A is the owner of the option and party B is the seller of the option, but because it is a call option, party A has the right to buy the stock from party B at the price capital K. So, that means the owner of the stock is actually party B and the buyer of the stock is party A if the exercise actually takes place. So, the owner of the option is in this case the buyer of the underlying asset, namely party A, and the seller of the option, namely party B, is actually the owner of the underlying stock. So, next, to put it in some mathematical formulation, if the market price, and now I am talking about the market price at time capital T, so at small t the spot price was S of t and S of capital T is the price of the stock at time capital T expiration. So, if the market price is S of capital T at time capital T is larger than the strike K, then the owner will exercise the call option. But if the market price ST is less than K, then the owner will not exercise the call option. So, let us illustrate this through an example. Suppose my S of t, that is the spot price today, is 100, and then I agree on an option with expiration t is equal to 1 year and the strike price or the exercise price is 105. Now, suppose that the stock price today, which is 100, goes up to 110, or another possibility is it goes down to 95. So, let us examine what is going to happen in case of the stock price going up to 110. Then party A, which is the owner of the option, they will consider two positions. They see that they can purchase the stock for 105, which is the strike price, and they can immediately sell the stock at the current market price of 110. So, that means they are able to make a profit of 110 minus 105 is equal to 5. So, obviously, this is a beneficial situation for them. So, they are obviously going to exercise the option, pay 105 and immediately sell it in the market at the current prevailing market price of 110, thereby making an immediate profit of 5. However, in the case when the price goes down to 95, what are they going to do? They are going to do, they see that okay, if I exercise the option and I purchase the stock for 105, then I will be able to sell it in the market only at the current prevailing price of 95. So, this means that I will purchase this for an amount of 105, but I will receive only an amount of 95. 95 minus 105 is minus 10. So, this means that in the first scenario there is a gain, and in the second scenario there is a loss. So, obviously, whenever there is a loss, then the option will not be exercised, because there is no reason for party A to purchase the stock for 105 when they can get it in the market for simply 95, which is a lower price. However, in the other case, they know that they can purchase it for 105, sell it for 110 and then make a profit of 5. So, this means that here either they will get an amount of, so this is S of t minus k, and in this case, second case, there will be no exercise that is going to happen. So, that means here the payoff or the gain is going to be equal to 0, because the exercise actually has not taken place and no transaction takes place. So, this brings us to the concept of what is known as a payoff. Payoff is basically the gain or loss to the owner of the option. So, in this case, since they have the right not to exercise in the event of a loss, so it is basically either the gain that they are going to make or simply 0, because they have decided not to exercise the option. So, this means that we have payoff is going to be the larger of this S of t minus k comma 0. So, it is going to be the larger of this or this. So, that means if your S of t is greater than or equal to k, then S t minus k is going to be your gain, and if S of t is less than k, that means you do not exercise and there is no loss or no gain. So, sometimes this is also written as S of t minus k plus. So, this is maximum of S t minus k comma 0 sometimes is put in this particular notation. So, graphically let us see how this looks like. So, if I take on my x axis the price of the stock at time capital T, and on the y axis I take the payoff, and this is the strike price k, then the payoff, which is maximum of S t minus k comma 0, will be given by this graph. All right. So, next we move on to European put option. Remember, in case of European put option, the party A, who is the owner of the option, is also the owner of the underlying asset, and they have the right to sell the underlying asset. So, let us see what is the analogous situation in case of put option, extending what you have already seen just now in case of the European call option. So, therefore, in case of an European put option where the owner of the option has the right to sell the underlying for strike k, the option will only be exercised if the price at price ST at maturity capital T is less than the strike price of k. So, in this case, the payoff is going to be maximum of 0 comma k minus ST, which is k minus ST plus. So, graphically this will look something like this. This is your S of t and this is your payoff. So, then if k is your strike, then this is basically going to be the graph of maximum of 0 comma k minus ST. Now that we are done with the European call and put option, let us just discuss briefly about the American call and put option. So, in case of American call and put options or American options in general, the following is the question that you want to answer, and this is the key question, because in case of American option you have the right to exercise the option any time between small t and capital T included. So, then there is an additional question as to what would be a good time to exercise. At every point, at every time point, you have to decide whether you want to exercise or not. So, this is the key question, that when does the early exercise of American option take place. So, to answer this question, let us just see the motivation. What is the motivation that one should exercise their American option? And let us just view this in the context of a call option. One will exercise the option only when there is a gain. So, that means only if the owner of the option sees that they can purchase the stock for a price of capital K and sell it in the market for a higher price of S of t, then only there is an incentive for the owner of the stock to actually exercise the option in order to make the profit. So, that means that early exercise will not take place at time t if K is greater than St, right. So, this means that basically if you find that the current stock price is St and the exercise price is K, then there is no reason for you to purchase the stock for K and sell it at a lower price. So, this is the case where there obviously any rational owner of the option will not exercise the option. However, let us look at the case when St greater than or equal to K. What happens? So, in this case the option may be exercised early. And please remember that this statement that I am making, this is in case of call option. In case of put option, if your St is less than or equal to K, then option may be exercised early. This means that if your K is greater than St and it is a American call option, you definitely know that the exercise will not take place. However, if it is a situation where S of t is greater than or equal to K, then the owner has a reason to consider exercise, but may decide not to exercise and hold on to the option for a future time point. So, next we will introduce the notion of in the money, at the money and out of money. So, we will discuss this in case of call and put option, and this is true for both European and American. So, there are three possibilities. If your S of t is greater than K, you have S of t is less than K and your S of t is equal to K. So, when S of t is greater than K, in case of call option it is called in the money. In case of put option, this is called out of money. When S of t is less than K, then it is out of money in case of call option, and in case of put option this will be in the money, and when S of t is equal to K, this is called at the money for both the cases. So, what does this mean in the money? So, in the money means that in case of a call option, if your S of t is greater than K, then you are obviously going to have an incentive to exercise. So, you are in the money. However, if your S of t is greater than K, then as an option holder or a holder of a put option, there is no reason for you to actually go ahead and exercise, and that is why it says that you are out of money. And likewise, when S of t is less than K, we say that you are out of money in case of a call option and in the money in case of a put option. And when both the prices coincide, that means the price of the stock at that given point of time t coincides with the strike price K, then we say you are basically at the money. So, this brings us to the notion of intrinsic value. So, what is the intrinsic value? The intrinsic value is basically S of t minus K or K minus St, maximum of this and St comma 0. So now let us come to a very important question. As we have discussed in detail that the price of an option, or rather the position of an option, offers leverage to one party and puts an obligatory situation in case of another party. So obviously the party which is the holder of the option enjoys a certain amount of privilege. So since this privilege ends up being the disadvantage for the other party, the question naturally arises, what is the incentive for the other party in the context of a discussion party B to get into an obligatory position? And the answer to this is that party B will get into this obligatory position because they are provided an additional incentive in terms of an upfront fee or premium to compensate for the weakened position they are getting themselves into. So this brings us to a very important question of option price. So remember that in case of the option price, the holder or the owner has the right, and which means that the writer has obligation, and because the writer is in an obligatory position, they have to be compensated for accepting this obligatory position. So in this case, because party B, they have decided to take a position where they are at a disadvantage, so they expect that party A, who are the owner of the option and have a position of advantage, will provide them with certain amount of compensation right at the beginning at time small t. And this particular compensation that you are talking about, this compensation or the payment, and this will be made at time small t, is called the premium or option price. So in the parlance of mathematical finance, option price is the term that is actually more commonly used. And as a result of the compensation, after receiving this compensation, they basically, the party B, they basically write the option. So remember that when you are talking about forwards and futures and stocks and bonds, we have talked about long and short positions. Likewise, in case of options also, so for options, the long position is the one that is held by the owner, and the short position is the position held by the, and so typically when options are written with basic assets such as bonds, stocks, they are called plain vanilla option. But when you have more sophisticated setup of underlying, then they are called exotic options. So one final observation is that again options are zero sum games. That means whatever is the gain of one party is going to be the loss of the other party. So let us conclude this discussion with one example, and that example is designed with the idea of addressing the question as to the reasons for trading options. So options, as you have seen, gives one party advantage and puts disadvantage on another party, and of course then they get compensated for taking up this position of disadvantage. However, the question is that what purpose does trading of options actually serve? So whenever you are actually introducing a financial derivative in the market, there has to be underlying example or underlying motivation as to why such a financial derivative needs to exist in the first place. So in particular, we will look at an example which will give you an insight into why options are traded in the first place. So, in this example, we will talk about something which is known as the hedging of risk. So, hedging of risk basically means, as the name hedging suggests, it is trying to protect yourself against future unpredictable market movements for the position that you are actually holding. So, in particular, let us consider an example. Suppose that we buy 100 stocks of a company, price of each stock is 100 and total investment in this case will be 100 into 100, which is 10,000. But we are worried that price might fall. So, suppose the price falls from 100 to 60, that means our investment of 10,000 then gets reduced to 6,000, giving us a loss of 4,000. So, in order to take care of this genuine concern that the prices of the stock might fall and that you might end up incurring losses, yes, what we do is the following, is that we buy or take ownership of 100 European put option on the same stock, which says strike K is equal to 100. So, then suppose the price of each option is 5. That means, this is the premium I have to pay to another party to take the obligation, and the obligation is that if I want, I will sell them the stock for an amount of 100 at some expiration at a future time, maybe say 1 year. So, since the price of each option is 5, so therefore, total cost of premium is going to be 5 into 100, which is 500. Now, let us see what happens. In case the price of the option goes, price of the underlying stock goes above 100, then there is no problem. We will sell it at a higher price, say it is 105, we sell it for 105 and on each share we make a profit of 5. So, overall profit is 500. However, why did we get into the put option? It was to take care of any possible losses. Now, suppose that a loss has happened. So, for example, suppose that the price of stock comes down to 80. If I had not taken the put option, then what would have happened is that I would have purchased, I have already purchased the stocks for 10,000 and I have to sell it for 8,000, resulting in a loss of 2,000. However, since I have purchased the put option, now that I observe that in the market the price is 80, I basically then decide that okay, I am going to exercise at K equal to 100 and receive 10,000. So, that means that in absence of me getting into the put option, what I would have done is that I would have lost 2,000. However, because I got into the put option, I am able to recover the entire investment of 10,000 and my only loss is simply the premium of 500 that I have paid. So, that means I have been able to cut my losses down from 2,000 to 500 in the event of the price moving in the downward direction from 100 to 80. So, this brings us to a conclusion of the discussion on options. So, what we have done so far is that we have looked at different kinds of markets. In particular, we looked at exchange traded markets and we looked at over the counter markets, and then we looked at different kinds of securities. The basic securities that we discussed as are bonds, which are risk free, and stocks which are risky, and then we moved on and discussed about forwards, futures, swaps, and most importantly options, which are the three most basic kinds of financial derivatives. Thank you for watching.